everyone, and welcome to the Empower Conference. We are beyond thrilled to welcome all of you here this weekend to celebrate International Women's Day with all of us. The theme of this year's International Women's Day is Choose to Challenge, and we have integrated this theme into our conference theme of Challenging Today to Change Tomorrow. So we hope that by the end of this weekend, this experience has fulfilled its intended purpose of empowering our community to challenge themselves, those around them, and societal expectations to evoke change for the better. As we all know, with challenge comes change, so we hope that by the end of this weekend, each of you chooses to challenge.
So when Evelyn and I first applied to be president and VP of DWIB, we had the idea of hosting a conference in honor of International Women's Day that would kind of bring together McMaster students and external delegates to celebrate such an important event, as well as uphold the mission of our club, which is to engage, motivate, and empower aspiring leaders. And although this year looks a little bit different than what we had imagined 1 year ago, it is definitely special in a very different way, and we're excited to bring so many people together in a virtual environment. We have a lot of exciting things in store for this weekend, including panels, exploring unique industries, workshops, and networking. And then last but not least, we also have some incredible giveaways and awards, which I will let Meg talk about in a bit more detail.
Hi there, everyone. We have some awesome awards and giveaways up for grabs during this conference. The first one is our Empower Bingo. This is not any ordinary bingo because each square actually contains a prompt that will guide you to get involved and participate throughout the conference. On our website, under the Empower tab, you'll be able to find the bingo card, which you can download to keep track of which squares you've completed. The bingo card has 2 pages, one with the actual card itself and one with prompts that match each square on the card. You must get 2 lines of 5 in a row in order to win. These lines can be vertical, horizontal, or diagonal, but to successfully complete these lines, you must answer each of the prompts on a separate page and email it to president@degrootwomen.com. The first 3 delegates to successfully submit their card and responses will each be awarded a $25 gift card of their choice. If you have any questions or concerns regarding that, please feel free to send us a DM on Instagram. We will also be hosting a number of other giveaways for our Den panel and Altice Kashmir, as well as giving away an award at the end for 3 of our most valuable delegates. Again, for more information, please look at our website or check us out on Instagram.
So we are all very much looking forward to having each of our delegates engage with these activities, and we hope you all enjoy them. It is my absolute pleasure to embark on the journey of the Empower Conference with each and every one of you. And with that, I would like to pass the spotlight on to Dr. Georgette Zanatti, our incredible keynote, to kick off the first ever Empower Conference.
Before we start with the Q&A questions, we can each take a brief moment to introduce the 3 of yourselves to our members. Just a little brief introduction, that would be great. Maybe let's start with Olivia.
Sure. So hi, my name is Olivia Mckenzie. I am a corporate commercial lawyer in the information technology group at Fasken. And so my practice basically involves helping businesses with their IT service needs. So whenever a business wants to onboard a particular software or information technology platform, we would help them with those transactions. And I do cybersecurity and privacy as well, and some corporate M&A, so mergers and acquisitions from an IT perspective as well.
Okay, awesome. Tara or Eileen, either of you want to go next?
Good afternoon, everyone. Very nice to see your faces and hear your voices. Really looking forward to today's session. My name is Eileen McMahon. I am a lawyer. I'm also a patent agent, and I practice at a law firm called Torys in Toronto, where I lead the intellectual property group, and I also lead the food and drug regulatory group. So looking forward to speaking with you today about what our days look like, what our challenges have been in our careers, and very much looking forward to hearing Tara and Olivia's stories as well.
Hey everyone. So can everyone hear me now? Because I think earlier my headphones weren't working. Okay, excellent. So nice to meet everyone. My name is Tara. I'm the principal lawyer and founder of my law firm, Remote Law Canada. And primarily we focus on civil litigation. Funny enough, the firm name ties to my early interest in remote work, which has kind of exploded throughout this pandemic. And at my firm, I try to use a lot of artificial intelligence and legal technology to resolve, or at least efficiently resolve, a lot of our civil litigation disputes. So that's me.
All right, awesome. Thank you all so much. So we're just going to jump right into the questions, and this question is going to be asked to all three of you. So if you could just take us through your experience from applying to law school to being in law school, and then kind of like your career path leading to your current position.
Should we follow the same order, Sarah?
Yeah, sure, we can do that.
Sure, so I'll go first. So I guess the space between my law school career and my career now isn't that long, because I'm a junior associate at the moment. So in terms of applying to law school, so I was working in accounting and finance. So I did graduate undergrad and I entered the workforce, and I was working in accounting and finance, and I found that accounting and finance can be quite structured. It's very, it's report heavy, and it follows a specific calendar. And so there's a lot of predictability there. And I just found that that level of repetition wasn't for me. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but it just wasn't how I saw myself practicing in my career. So then I started thinking, and I realized that the parts of accounting and finance that I really enjoyed was the advisory side. So whenever I was in a position where I was giving advice or playing sort of an advisory role, that's where I felt most comfortable. That's where I felt, that's where I shined. And so I started thinking about careers where I would be in an advisory role most of the time. And so I started thinking about a career in law. And classic me, I, started thinking about writing the LSAT, and I was like, you know what, the LSAT is just like any other test. Like, I write tests all the time. I'll study for a week and then I'll go write the LSAT. And, I found that the LSAT is a completely different animal of its own. So that didn't work. So I actually ended up having to write it again. So I wrote the LSAT for the second time. I got the score that I wanted. I applied to the different law schools, and I got accepted to Osgoode, which was my first choice. So I did my law school degree at my JD, I should say, at Osgoode. And then I went through so there's a very standardized recruitment process while you're in law school. So I kind of went through that recruitment process. It's like speed dating. There's a set day where you go and you meet all these different firms, and the ones that like you, they'll ask you to come for an in-firm interview, which we just had virtual in-firms this past week. And so I went through that process. I got a summer position at Fasken. They gave me an offer to come back as an articling student with it, which is like an apprenticeship program when you're studying to become a lawyer. I expressed an interest in the IT group, and so they offered me then a position to come back as an associate in the information technology group at the firm, and I've been there ever since 2019. So not that long ago, but yeah, so it's been a good ride so far.
It's so great to hear Olivia's story, because I think all of our stories will be a little different. I've been practicing almost 35 years now, practicing law. And when I look at my career, there were a lot of turns. There were a lot of disappointments. I started out in science and math at University of Toronto, thinking I was going to be a dentist. And with dentistry, there is a test called the DAT, or there used to be. And part of that test, in addition to testing your math and science, you had to carve chalk. Well, I scored 1 out of 9 on the chalk test. I was heartbroken. I thought my life is over. I'm not going to be a dentist. And my older brother suggested, well, why don't you try law and the LSAT? And so, like Olivia, I tried the LSAT. I think I bought the book, and you study over a weekend or two. And I also ended up at Osgood. And then my career, I've been at various firms. I've tried various law firms. I've been at small firms. I've been at large firms. I even practiced at Ernst & Young, an accounting firm. And so I look forward today to speaking with you about what all of that looks like. And if you had interviewed me, or if we had spoken together when I was in my 20s, I don't think I would have predicted that this is the career and life I have. So I look forward to speaking with you about that and how to deal with some forks in the road that you might have in your careers, and choices that you make, and disappointments, and how you kind of dust yourself off from those experiences to move on in your careers. So thank you. Thank you.
I have to say, I echo Eileen and Olivia's comments. Really, there's a traditional way or a traditional path, and some of us end up in that. And there's also, unpredictability. And I can say that I followed the same trajectory as Olivia. I attended law school. My undergrad was in law and society and political science. So I kind of always knew that I was going to end up there. But I also didn't know that I was going to end up pursuing my law degrees in French. So at the time, I had actually applied because I had done an international exchange while in undergrad, and I lived in Greece for 6 months, which was just amazing. And I was convinced when I came back that I wanted a civil law degree so that I could practice internationally. And of course, here I am still in Toronto. So when I applied, the civil law degree was available as a Canadian law degree at the University of Ottawa, but in French, because Quebec is a civil law jurisdiction. So I had applied to the dual degree program and obtained my civil law and common law degrees in French, and it was incredibly challenging. I was in French immersion from kindergarten through to grade 9, and then had about 8 years of absolutely no French in my life whatsoever. Was it scary at first? Absolutely. I was studying with, individuals who were all Francophone, born and raised in French households, and I was on the complete opposite end of the spectrum. But, and I think we'll talk about it later. And I agree with Eileen. I'm so excited to share some of these experiences, because all of that allowed me to approach not just my law degree, but my practice in a very unique way. I had to be highly analytical. I had to look at situations very differently, even just from the substance. So being in a civil procedure classroom where, half the exam was how would you deal with the civil code, and half of the exam was, well, how would you apply the common law to the same set of facts? So from that perspective, but even further than that, it was interpreting all of the legislation in French as a second language. And so it created these amazing analytical skills and these efficiency skills that definitely carried throughout the rest of my career. And, going back to the same thing that Olivia had done, I went and I did the OCIs, which are the on-campus interviews. And within my first week in law school, I saw, BLG Montreal, and I thought, oh my God, this is the most amazing thing I've ever seen. I absolutely have to work here. And then, going back to Eileen, here I am just a couple years later, and it couldn't be more opposite to the way I practice now. So, I was in law school, followed the standard procedure, got myself a summer position and an articling position at BLG in Ottawa. And when it came down to applying to stay on as an associate, something else kicked in. I had been there in first year, second year, my articles, and then I realized, my family was in Toronto, everyone was in Toronto. Was it really worthwhile staying over there and sacrificing all of these other things? And so I kind of took a leap of faith, ended up in Toronto. Also, like Eileen, bounced around to a couple firms before ending up where I am now. And, it definitely was not on the radar whatsoever, but I couldn't picture it any other way.
Amazing. Thank you so much. I'll just introduce myself before I ask the next question. I'm Meg. I'm also going to be moderating this panel. It is so awesome to hear so many diverse experiences in law. I'm in my second year university and there's so much unpredictability in it. So it's awesome to hear that there's so many different paths you could take. The next question we have is, how did you know you wanted to pursue a career in law? And could you tell us more about your current respective area of practice and how you became interested in it?
Sure. So I think I touched on this earlier about wanting to be in an advisory role. So I'll skip past that and I'll talk about kind of how I got interested in my area of practice. So I got introduced, I guess, in my like fourth year of undergrad. The first time I got introduced to like intangible rights was there was a professor in a business studies class of mine, and he, at the time, I think it was Apple had a litigation going on where they were suing Samsung for copying the interface on the iPhone. And it was like a multi-billion-dollar litigation. And I was, in my head, I was like, how is this thing that no one can hold or touch or feel worth so much that Apple is willing to spend years litigating over this thing, and for, you know, lawyers' fees are very expensive. So this was going to cost them millions and millions of dollars. And I was just fascinated by that. So that was my real introduction to intangible rights. And so in law school, I started taking more courses like copyrights, trademarks, patents around IP rights. And again, I found that very interesting. So I actually thought I was going to be an IP lawyer when I started summaring and articling at Fasken. So I did, they gave us the ability to choose a specialized rotation. So I chose a rotation in IP. And then I did a patent application and I realized I did not have what it took to be a patent lawyer. It's super technical. You know, I had a business law background. The firm was very supportive of me pursuing this, even though I didn't have a technical background. But, you know, I attended a meeting with an inventor who wanted to get one of his inventions patent, and the partner was there and the inventor was there, and they were speaking to each other and they were speaking a completely different language. I had no idea what was going on. They were both excited. They were like over the moon about this new invention, and I couldn't even grasp what they were talking about. So there was that. And then the second thing was, I still wanted to, you know, I had a business background and I still wanted that to to be a part of my practice. And in IP, it's more about, you know, crystallizing your IP rights. And I really wanted to be on the commercialization side. And so, you know, I started speaking to different lawyers around the firm, and they were like, you know, Olivia, what you're explaining to me is not what you will be doing in the IP group, but actually what you would be doing in the IT group. So this is why it's very important to, as much as you can, get practical experience when you're thinking about what you want to do. So if there's a co-op program or internship program or some opportunity where you can actually, you know, spend some time working with people doing the things you want to do, those are great opportunities to take advantage of, because that's the only way I realized that what I envisioned in my head was actually in the IT group and not in the IP group. So, you know, I started working more with them, and I started realizing I still get to work with intangible assets, but I also get to use, you know, my business knowledge, and think about it from the commercialized standpoint, and kind of work with, you know, two parties who are trying to come up with an agreement and trying to reach an equilibrium that works for both of them. And so that's really the story of how I got into IT. And I don't have a lot of people assume that I have a tech background, like a technology background, but I absolutely don't. So it's more of, it's a lot of self-learning on my piece. It's a lot of asking questions when I'm meeting with clients. It's a lot of doing my own background research to kind of, you know, go up the learning curve, but it's something I really enjoy. And so it's not so much of a huge burden for me.
Very interesting, Olivia. So I really didn't have a master game plan in terms of law. When I look back, I'm very grateful that I did pursue law because in some ways it's like a puzzle. So, Tara mentioned how analytical it can be, and Olivia spoke about the analytics involved in her IT practice. It's very much, if you like analytical work, puzzles, trying to get to a solution, law is a fascinating career. And so I would say the way my career developed was really when I was at a spot or working with people and I did not like it. I knew that I could close that door. So I'll give you an example. The firm that I started out with, at that time, they expected that you would do a rotation in corporate law. So I was in the intellectual property group, and I found it horrible. It was the 80s, 90s, very male dominated, really no talk about your life or family, so it was a very, very stressful environment, I found, for me. So I stayed there 2 years and I put in my time, but I knew that I did not want to do corporate law. Like, the idea, at that time they did not have remote access, and you would work at your desk at all hours of the day and night on deals, and it was just the dynamic. So for me, then that door closed, and I thought to myself, well, what can I do to leverage my science background? There are lots of great corporate lawyers out there. I could not bring business to the table. I had no family connections. And so on Bay Street, I was worried, well, am I going to be able to make it here if I don't bring business in? How is that going to work? So I thought to myself, well, if I can leverage my science background in an area of the law, maybe that will be a distinguishing feature for me. And so for that reason, I tried to slot myself into intellectual property. And after I had 6-7 years in that area, I also started to do food and drug regulatory, because intellectual property really relates to products. You could be speaking with somebody about a new type of food or a new type of cereal and patenting that product. And before you know it, they're then speaking about, well, what regulatory hurdles might I face to get this product on the market? So to me, that was a natural segue. And I would say that my career path in some ways was defined by trying firms, trying people, trying practices, and then closing the door on what I did not enjoy. What was causing me stress, I closed the door and I tried to go towards what was empowering me, what made me feel good, and people that I loved to work with. So that would be my answer to that question.
So again, I think I echo Olivia in some ways and Eileen in some ways for sure. So, Olivia mentioned flexibility. When I initially pursued my career, I was completely consumed in the idea that to be a successful lawyer, you had to work for one of these large firms. And it was really just about, fighting off whichever practice area you could get your experience in and getting involved in it. What I learned and what I tend to expose my own students at my firm to is that, as Olivia mentioned, you really have to get a taste of as much as you can. And only from there will you be able to figure out, what you're really passionate about and what you're going to enjoy on a long-term basis. So when I was at BLG, I was fortunate. It was a full service firm. I had to do a corporate rotation, a litigation rotation, and I was in every practice area imaginable, whether it was family law, construction law, labor and employment, insurance defense, you name it. And, that's quickly how I figured out that I loved employment law. I was working with one of the practice leads. He was a huge labor and employment partner. And, by the time I finished my articles, I was attending arbitrations with him, mediations, and I was heavily involved in this area. And until now, employment law is probably one of the largest areas of my practice. So keeping yourself flexible. But then, I also agree with Eileen, and it's really what you're passionate about. So although I was completely drawn to employment law, one thing that I think was really interesting about my career is that it was never so much in the beginning, it was about, just having a successful career in law wherever you ended up. And then quickly it became, well, what am I passionate about and how can I build my career around that? So quickly, as I started, jumping from firm to firm, I started first in an insurance firm just because, I was coming from Ottawa. There were tons of articling students that didn't have positions, didn't get hired back from their firm. So it was very competitive. And I had the most experience in insurance and in employment. I stayed at the insurance firm for about 8 months, and then I got an employment law position. And of course, I went there right away. And then, funny enough, I was there for a couple months, and then I accepted a civil litigation position where, again, I was getting exposure to all of these different areas. When I was at my last firm, where I was a civil litigator just under 2 years ago, I found that, I was using a lot of my undergrad skills. So I had the law and society degree, and I was writing a lot, and I could often write a lot and very quickly because my entire undergrad was focused around writing essays. And so, often lawyers tend not to be, although we write great argument, I'm not sure that we write great opinion, or we write, really from a non-legal perspective. And so I had that, and I, until this day, credit that with my undergrad. And that's really where the skills that you're learning now, you should be taking, the way that Eileen had taken her background towards the future. So all of those writing skills, separate and apart from the analytical skills I learned in law school, helped me in my legal career. So I started writing a lot on artificial intelligence, on different employment law cases and things like that. And some notoriety started to build from that. At the same time, just by chance, I kept myself very open and very flexible. And again, I was looking for my passion. So that's how we got into the remote work space. One day I was just sitting at home. I saw a video from The Economist on YouTube, and it was about this digital nomad couple. And I thought, what the heck is a digital nomad couple? So I went and I looked at it, and this was the most incredible thing I've ever seen. This couple, they're working, traveling. 1 month they're in Bali, the next month they're in Australia, the next month they're in Japan. And I was thinking, oh my God, how do I mimic this? How does this become my life? And so I reached out, because I was doing a lot of writing, to the chief editor at Canadian Lawyer Magazine, and I wrote an article from the legal perspective, but again, with my little twist here on how, or the legal issues affecting digital nomads. From there, snowball effect. That article connected me to this remote work and digital nomad community, and it literally got to the point where so much was happening. We were put in an article in Forbes, and at that point my career started to become too big for the firm that I was working at, and I realized that I really wanted to take it on myself. And it was the best thing ever. But keeping yourself flexible, keeping your options open, and not tying yourself to any sort of traditional practice, and also just keeping yourself constantly learning, constantly iterating. And it's really, it keeps things interesting, but it also opens you up to a lot of opportunities. So, I have younger cousins that now are going through this undergrad situation. And, when they ask me about what they should do with the rest of their lives, I pretty much tell them, you have to look at it from a creative perspective. What does the world of work look like right now? And what will it look like in the future? And what kind of skills can you develop now that will come in handy later? But, it's interesting because we all get bogged down with this idea that, we need to go into medicine or law or engineering. And, my family's a perfect example. My older sister's a family doctor. My younger sister's an actuary. So, we definitely hit all of those things. But, what's going to be attractive in the future? Is it going to be, data skills, analytic skills, and things like that? So constantly keep yourself open, keep yourself flexible when you're in the legal industry, because it's changing, at unprecedented levels, and you'll do just fine.
Great answers. Thank you. I know for me, as someone who's fourth year commerce student graduating this year, time's very uncertain, and I have law school, as a goal on the horizon. Hearing each of your stories about how you became interested in in your respective areas. That is very, very informative to me, and I think to a lot of other people here today. So next, we're kind of going to jump into questions for each of you personally. So it'll just be directed at one of you. This next one is directed at Olivia specifically. And we're kind of interested in what has been the greatest challenge that you've faced so far in your career, and how did you overcome it?
So I think the greatest challenge I faced was and is imposter syndrome, and being in a space where, to be honest, there aren't many people that look like me. There aren't many women, and there aren't, I mean, the number of women in law has definitely exploded in the last couple of years. So it's definitely better. But even if you look at the senior partnership level, there aren't many women, and definitely not many women of color. And particularly in my area of practice, technology is a very white male dominated space. So most of the time, if I'm at a conference or if I'm, anywhere where lawyers, a networking event that's around technology, I am probably one of a handful of women. And, I bet my house on the fact that I'm going to be the only Black woman. And so dealing with that and navigating a space where you don't necessarily feel like you belong is a particular challenge. And it also leads to a lot of self-doubt. So I remember my very first day of law school. I walked into like my first constitutional law class, and the professor asked a question and someone answered, and he's a good friend of mine now. But I remember Dan, he answered this question, and I was like, I vowed to myself, I was like, I will never answer a question in class, because I will never be able to come up with anything that is as insightful and as eloquently put as he did. And so, and throughout my life, like I was, always comfortable with public speaking. And so going through law school and having my personality change in that way, where I was so unsure about myself, was something I didn't even know how to deal with or how to navigate. And so I definitely, leaned on my friends. And one of the things that I leaned on my friends, I leaned on my community, my law school community, and started being honest with my friends about how I was feeling, and finding out that they felt the same. Like even the tall, blonde hair, blue-eyed white men felt exactly the same. And so sharing my experience there helped. And then being in the legal profession, which is also, a very predominantly white male space, it's also just one of the things that make me feel comfortable is when I know what I'm doing. And so and that's comforting for me. And so I will always take the time to make sure that I comfort myself in knowing that I've done my background research, I know what I'm talking about, and just comforting myself with that. And also, getting out of my own head. So getting out of my own head in the sense of saying, giving myself that pep talk and saying, Olivia, you know what you're doing, you've done your research, and performing. And so when I do that, I feel confident, and I feel, and also telling myself that nobody can make a space not yours. I've earned my spot in this profession, and nobody can take that away from me. And I'm not going to let anyone take that away from me. And so I give myself a lot of internal pep talks, and that's really how I've gotten through it.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Olivia. This next question is for Eileen. So, this past year we've heard it say multiple times, it's so unprecedented and so unpredictable. So can you tell us more about how COVID-19 has impacted your work, and what kinds of opportunities and challenges have you experienced during the past year?
Thank you, Meg. Yeah, so if we look back, I think of it as Friday, March the 13th. I remember when Prime Minister Trudeau said, if you're outside of Canada, get back to Canada, about a year ago. And there have been a lot of challenges. So if I might break it into two buckets, the first being internal. So what I mean internal to the law firm I work at, and then external would be what have been the challenges with our clients and work, etc. So internally, I lead a team, if you include our law clerks and our assistants and lawyers, probably about 50 to 60 people at the firm. And so the initial challenge was really trying to lead. Like I lead day in, day out pre-COVID, but now we had a whole different pivot where people were struggling when they learned it went on for more than 2 weeks. You know, kids were at home and they didn't have a space where they could conduct calls. People who were living on their own in a small apartment in downtown Toronto, 500 square feet, didn't have any green space. And so the first challenge, and really the challenge that we've had throughout, is being supportive for our team, transparent, compassionate, understanding that some days we'll get up and it's nice and sunny and we'll feel great with our coffee. And then other days we may struggle with mental health issues and not feel so great and not be able to cope. So I think that was one significant challenge, the internal, how we're all working on this together and connecting with each other and supporting one another. Externally with clients, in some ways, COVID has been very positive. Why? Our practice within our group is very international. So we deal with people in Europe, in the United States, and all over. And many times pre-COVID, it would be by conference call. So you wouldn't have the chance, just like we're having the chance today, to see each other and see our expressions. So one hugely positive thing in connecting with clients I found was that they were very vulnerable too. Many of them would say, well, you know, I've got an elder parent and I'm really worried because she's in a home. And so there was a really terrific sense of connection with people that actually hadn't been there before. So I love that. The other positive was that in the legal profession, the amount of work went way up. So some people have done very, very well with COVID, and generally lawyers, accountants, business persons, I would say, generally have done very well because we're able to work remotely, etc. Others have not done well. And so collectively, I think it's important for us to consider that and say, is there any way we can give back as a community, given that we still can put food on the table and have warm beds at night, that type of thing. So COVID has been very positive in that way. The negatives, I think, are really that we're all kind of reeling from day to day with the volume of the news, and it impacts, of course, our work environment. And so being compassionate and empathetic, I think, is an important thing.
Thank you for that, Eileen. So this next question is for Tara. And as someone who's planning on going to law school in the future, I'm interested in hearing your answer to this question. So if you could give one piece of advice to someone in university who's interested in pursuing a career in law, what would it be?
So Sarah, I'm so happy that you're considering law school. You know, I have to say, previously the answer used to be, you know, maybe don't think about it, but it's completely changed. I think that my one piece of advice would be, don't limit yourself by thinking about what it's supposed to look like. So, you know, I'll echo Olivia here. There is a lot of imposter syndrome, and exactly what Olivia had said, you know, even though as a woman of color, you're in law school and it's a completely different experience, almost everyone in law school is going through the same type of, at least a variation of imposter syndrome. And it tends to come with what we think law practice or a lawyer should look like. Now, we're in a time where the legal industry is evolving like crazy. So, you know, the fact that right now I'm running my own firm and I'm able to say, you know, we use things like artificial intelligence, different legal tech, you know, I have a completely different approach to the practice of law than many of my other principals or lawyers that I worked for did. And, you know, I'll add, it's amazing. This week, I actually started crying on the phone. I got a phone call on Monday that the firm won Employment Law Firm of the Year from Canada's Prestige Awards. And what brought me to tears was the fact that this woman phoned me personally, and she told me that it was a client that had written something so moving in the description of why we were deserving of this award that really, made me emotional. And my response to her was, when she was asking me how the pandemic has been and what I really enjoy about my practice, it was just that. It was the fact that I can now approach files, cases, legal work in the way that I want. And I tend to have a much more human approach, and a much more personal approach than I think I was ever able to do when I was in, traditional practice. So my one piece of advice would be, if you're considering going to law school, don't let some of these limitations hold you back. And one of the things that always helped me was that I focused on priorities or my life outside of law. So, I'll say it here, and I said it to U of T last year, but it's funny, not too many people know about it. When I was making the decision not to stay at BLG, whereas, the rest of my cohort had applied and had been chosen to stay, it wasn't just about, coming back and being with my family or wanting to be in Toronto. I even had this other thought about wanting to come back and be in a long-term relationship. And I was looking at my life and I was thinking, okay, I'm 27 years old. Everyone in my life, including my parents, are saying, stay at BLG, get a couple years experience, and then come back. Now I look back on the last 3 years of my life, and, I've got a wonderful partner. We've, traveled everywhere. We have such a great relationship, and the relationships with my family and my friends have improved. So I think when you apply that to law school, it makes such a difference, and you don't really fall into that imposter syndrome is a great term, or really that traditional mindset. So focusing on your priorities outside of law and realizing that there's so much that's evolving in this industry, where really, I think I'm a token example. You've got a woman of color that's running this firm that's doing, fairly well. The opportunities are endless. So absolutely consider pursuing the career, and just think about the fact that it's changing so much, and it's changing in such a unique and wonderful way.
Fantastic. Thank you guys so much. You've answered these questions beautifully, but we'll now open it up to the audience. If you guys have any questions, just use the raise hand function and we'll call on you. So Ada, you can start us off.
It's Ada. Thanks so much, Meg. I just before I ask my question, I just want to say I've wanted to be a lawyer since I was 9. And so seeing you 3 women just talk about your stories and experiences and how you've all been so successful in your various paths, I just want to say it's so deeply inspiring to me. So I just want to say thank you for coming to speak at this event today. My question would be, I think Olivia touched on this before, how law is very a male dominated space. And so what advice would you give to a woman such as myself, or, who's entering this very male dominated space? How do you, build up the confidence to kind of be a leader in these situations and take up space yourself when it can be a little bit intimidating?
So I'll go. So I will say and this is going to sound very cliche, and I'm upset that I'm going to use this cliche, but honestly, just be yourself. So there was a point, and it was literally while I was in line to go to my first OCI, and I had spent all this time prior to twisting myself into a pretzel, trying to be who I thought a lawyer should be, and who we think lawyers should be traditionally is a white man. So I started moving myself towards this, what I thought this lawyer should be. And when I was in the line, I was like, you know what? I'm just going to be myself, and what they get is going to be what they get. And so, there's this picture of my first articling class, and they took this picture the first day we arrived at the firm, and everyone is wearing either a black or a navy suit, and there I am in my pink blazer. And I was like, you know what? I like to wear color. I like to accessorize. I am, this is who I am as a woman, and I'm not going to let, this profession or what I think I should be as a lawyer stop me from being, who I am as a person. And so I would tell, women who are coming up after me is, let's try to change the space. I don't want 10 years from now for everyone at a law firm to think that you have to dress a certain way, you have to be a certain way, you have to act a certain way. It's not enough for me to exist in this space. I want, or have a seat at the table. Like, I want to flip the table. We need to, you know, this space it doesn't work for everyone. And so the more we be ourselves and bring different personalities and different perspectives, not only do I think it makes us more relatable to clients from a business perspective, but also it makes everyone more comfortable being whatever variation of themselves. So to women coming up, I would just say, honestly, be yourself, whatever that looks like. If you enjoy wearing black and navy suits, go for it. But if you are the Elle Woods of the legal profession, then show up being the Elle Woods that you are, and everyone else is just going to have to deal with it.
Those are some great points, Olivia. And a couple of things that I had struggled with and still do is when you go into a meeting or boardroom and it is all white males or mostly white males. And I'm not sure if you have all experienced this at business school, but many times women, we want to get the answer perfect in our head before we contribute. And I had to get some counseling because I would go into a meeting and I would be physically marginalized as well as by participation because I wasn't contributing. So a couple of the tips that I try to do is I try to speak early at a meeting. It doesn't matter what I say, generally speaking, the guys are very comfortable with not being particularly astute or wise. They just contribute. And so I've tried to do that at meetings myself, get in early and get my point across. The other thing is the tone of my voice. And, so to some extent, I may have gone down the path, Olivia, where I feel that I have had to change a bit, up talk. So I've really tried not to use up talk when I speak, to get comfortable with silence, pauses, and a tone that's authoritative. Practicing with a recorder so I can hear myself, so that I am credible, whether it's on a phone call or in a meeting. And the other thing is, Olivia spoke earlier about visualization. I use that a lot. So before I go into a tough meeting or a call, I use the similar type of self-talk that Olivia uses. You've got this. You're going to nail this. This is going to be so much fun to show the boys in the sandbox how you play. And so, there's a TED talk on power posing, and some people might say it's corny. I love that. Go to the table, put your seat physically right at the front or near the front. You have a spot there and you've earned it.
And I just, again, I echo Olivia and Eileen. It's really, I think for me, it's always been about equalizing the playing field. So, anytime I showed up in a room, it was really, I tried not to be intimidated by anybody that was around me. And there's several things at play. It's being a woman, it's being younger, having a different racial background. All of those things will create this imbalance. But really, it was about walking in and knowing, that you have the same degree. You may not have the same level of experience, but you've really accomplished the same things, up to that point. And so I never let it come in the way. And I think some of those things, pep talks, are really important. But even more so, I would say, I always had the opinion that when you walk into a room and if somebody decides that they're going to treat you differently, that's on them. So, if somebody was going to offend me or was going to treat me differently for whatever reason, I didn't let it shake me up. I mean, it meant that either if it was a firm, well, I didn't want to be a part of that firm or that practice, or if it was just going to be, in a regular negotiation, let's call it a mediation in civil litigation. Well, it was going to impact how I was going to come to the table, and I was gonna leave it there. I wasn't going to let it really alter, how I felt about the situation. So I think this, maybe it's a defense mechanism, but it's always worked. And it was really just about, coming in and knowing that we've got the same skills, we've got the same amount of experience, the same degrees. And so if somebody else was going to treat you differently for whatever reason, that's on them. And you can let them operate that way, but you shouldn't let it affect you. And I think a lot of these things again come back to priorities. So I'll just say there's and I'm not sure how Eileen and Olivia feel about this, but there's this community of lawyers on Twitter, and they tend to use the hashtag law Twitter. Now, I love this community. They're fantastic, but sometimes I find it very discouraging. And it's often, simply about everyone being overloaded with work, or how horrible being a lawyer is, or what the legal industry is. And again, my defense mechanism has tended to be focusing on all of the things outside of law. And, that really, it's the same type of thing of why people do physical exercise or why people meditate. It's just you're enhancing these other areas of your life that undoubtedly have an effect on the way you practice or your career. And so, I think that balance is important, and we tend to get stuck when we're in certain careers. We tend to get discouraged by the people around us. But, if you just stepped outside for a second to anyone else, to a client, you're a lawyer. And it don't get caught in this mindset when it's competing between other people in the industry, because to the rest of the external world, you're just the same, So I think it's important to remember that. And I really think it's important to lean on family and friends and experiences that are completely separate, because it just does an amazing job for your confidence. And at the end of the day, those are the things that matter.
Incredible. Thank you so much. The next question will come from Hafsa. I believe you had you couldn't raise your hand. So if you want to ask your question now, feel free.
Yeah, of course, for sure. First of all, thank you to all three of you. You guys have been super inspiring with your stories. Obviously, we all learned something. My question is specifically for Tara. So you mentioned that you have your own firm now. So obviously, at this point in life, and I feel like most of the people here could relate, we always think about being an entrepreneur as well. So my question for you is, how did you find the courage to actually open up your own firm? I know you've had amazing experiences in the past, but what was that? Is there a specific thing that pushed you to open your own? Did you manage with all the struggles in the past to go for it?
So that's a great question. And I think, you answered a part of it just at the beginning. Your generation has this entrepreneurial mindset that I think didn't exist, or at least wasn't glorified when, I was in law school or I was in undergrad. And so I think really the courage, and I'll say, this was never the game plan, never. If somebody asked me, a month or two before it happened, even just a month or two, I wouldn't have known it was going to happen. And so it was a leap of faith. It definitely took, several iterations. A lot happened. It's night and day the way the firm is now versus when I started, and it's been just under 2 years. But I think the courage came from the current landscape. So seeing that, there's so much creativity available, and there's so many different ways of practicing. And the example that I like to give when I talk to a lot of lawyers about this is, and I describe what client service and client expectations are in the 21st century, is, even as lawyers or as students or whoever you are, you have certain expectations of other industries. With Amazon, you've got an expectation at Christmas time that you're going to order something 2 days before and it's going to show up and you're going to have your Christmas gifts ready. With Netflix, you have an expectation that certain titles are going to be offered and that, you're going to be able to pause them and do as you please. And the same thing with so many other things, Uber, an expectation that it's going to be available and that they're going to show up when you need them. Clients have the same expectations of lawyers. So if we have these expectations of all of these other industries and these efficiencies, why do we expect that they're not going to have the same expectations of us? So when you take that and you really look at the way legal services are provided right now, it becomes really easy. So, starting the firm, it wasn't so much about, did I need to have, a strategy or a game plan when I started? It was more so from the mindset of, what do clients want and how can I offer it? And I think that's really what created the courage. It was just, I had clients already at the firm that I was fortunate came with me. So I had about 10 or 15 start with me when I started the firm. And I really just, continued doing what I was doing, but now doing it a lot more on my own and the way that I wanted to do it. And it slowly grew organically like that. And I think that's really where the courage came from. It came from, all of those things aside, the way that lawyers are or are supposed to be and the way that traditional law firms are, all of that aside, at the end of the day, if somebody wants to buy a house as a real estate lawyer, well, this is what you need to do. If somebody's been wrongfully dismissed, this is what you need to do. And how can you approach it on such a human level? So I think a lot of the courage really came from that. It was, instead of having, a game plan and a step-by-step, this is how I'm going to operate, this is how things are going to be, these are the software I'm going to use. It was even so much more simpler than that. What is the issue I need to resolve? How can I resolve it? And that's it. And, the way that it's grown now, I started, super small, and now I've got these offices. I've got one on Bay Street. I've got, 3 students working for me, 2 law clerks, and I never would have predicted that. That was 0% part of the game plan, but it was just about, creating something that really was going to fix an issue. And so you'll find, even when you become a lawyer, a lot of it is friends and family that are just seeking legal advice. And I know Eileen and Olivia can totally relate. But it's when you simplify it like that and you get out of the mix and out of what things are supposed to look like or how you're supposed to behave, you find the courage.
And it worked out amazingly. Congratulations on the award.
Oh, thanks.
Thank you.
All right, thank you guys. So we're going to actually take a question from the chat, which has been there for quite a while now. So we're just going to be mindful of that before we get to the 3 other ladies who have their hands raised. So this question is directed at Olivia specifically, and it says, do you find that you get mansplained to a lot when it comes to discussing different technologies and software?
To be honest, I would have to say that I don't think I have that experience, because most of the time when I'm dealing with clients, they look at me as being the expert. So they might be the expert on the software and the technology, but the dynamic between us is that I have the legal expert. And so they're really leaning on me to help them commercialize whatever the software is, or whatever the technology is. And so I don't find that I have that experience very often. And I think that's one of the things that I enjoy about the legal career, the legal profession, is that although I'm a junior, and Tara touched on this, although I'm a junior within the firm, and thankfully I have a very great team. So even the seniors in the team, really do treat me with respect and don't mansplain me. But although I'm the junior within my team, when I'm speaking with clients, all they see me as is a lawyer. So they are just like, you have this expertise. I am leaning on you to provide me with this expertise. And there's no point if they're going to mansplain me. Well, you're paying me for this time, so I mean, if you want to mansplain me on time you're paying for, feel free to go ahead. But I can't say that I have that experience very often.
Awesome. Thank you, Olivia. We're going to be taking one more question. So Megan, if you want to ask.
Sure. Hi. So I first want to thank Olivia, Tara, and Eileen for speaking. You guys are also inspiring. My question is for Eileen. You talked about the forks in the road that you experienced in your career. And I was just wondering, how do you dust yourself off from those disappointments and not let it affect your mentality and your attitude going forward?
That's a great question, Megan. I think when I look at what's gone wrong in my career, without a doubt, there are days where I feel devastated. I remember there was one time I was about a second or third year lawyer at my former firm. It was a big Bay Street firm. And a senior partner said to me, I asked her for some feedback on some work I did. And she got up and closed the door and had a big sigh and said, I might as well tell you, you will never make it on Bay Street. And I remember my husband and I were supposed to go away for a romantic weekend in Montreal. It wasn't much of a romantic weekend. I was devastated. And it has happened a lot through my career where someone will say something, and because we're type A personalities for the most part, we care, we try. And when you get that kind of criticism, it's just brutal. And so, like Tara said, and Olivia probably has the same experience, I find that relying on people you love, brother, sister, mother, father, dear friend, who you can go to when you're gutted like that, who can just say, you know what, Megan, you're still a fantastic person. Like, don't let what that person said affect your road. So there'll be a few days where it's still gut wrenching, but then after a little bit, I find that it helps you in a way to say, how am I going to move forward? Like Tara said, to have some outside interests. So, whether it's going for a walk or playing a puzzle or meditating, something that may help you a little bit with your mental health in those situations, because without a doubt, it's hard. But I think all three of us speaking today are examples where there have been times in our careers where it's been brutal. There could be a comment or someone has said something, and look at us. Like, we're fantastic. Like you all are inspiring to me, like an entire group of 40 or 50 women. And so we will get through this together, and it will happen that you'll have some days where it's not as pleasant, but your friends, family, interest, hopefully that'll help to dust you off, Megan. Does that help?
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much.
All right. Thank you so much to everyone who asked questions and came out today, as well as our amazing, amazing panelists. Like, I can't thank you enough for coming here today, taking time out of your day and engaging in this conversation with us. It was so, so meaningful.